If everybody's ready, I will go ahead and call this meeting of the Economic Development Commission to order. And I will just note for the record that we have a quorum anyway. Councilman Schron, Harriet Applegate from the AFL-CIO, Mayor Akers is here, Joe Roman is here from the Greater Cleveland Partnership, Mayor Jackson, and myself. We have a number of things to get you. Thanks you for being a little emergency situation I had to deal with. It's dealt with. So I thank you for your patience. Any opening remarks before we get down to some of the things on the agenda? Any remarks that members of the commission want to make? Hearing none, the first item is regarding the selection of the ninth member of the commission. And Dorothy, why don't I turn it over to you for a moment, and if you could just quickly recap what process we've had up to this point and what we're planning on doing.
So the process has been the county council process took place, and we selected Brian Hall. And Brian Hall would be with us today, but he's on spring break with his daughter, so he will be at the next 3 meetings. There were some candidates that were very good that were remaining from that process, and you've got a packet of a list of candidates. Jay Mazelski and Jeffrey Thrope came out of that process. Brian Hall and the mayor submitted the name of Daryl McNair. Everyone was to get back to me by March 1st, I believe it was, with the candidates. So we have Daryl McNair, who is the CEO of MVP Plastics. You've got a profile on Daryl. I'll just go through these quickly, and then if people would like to say something about them, they can. Paul Clark had been recommended, and his PNC president. And then we have a couple of self-nominations in here from Eric Johnson, whose resume is in there, and then a recommendation from Tim Linville at the Construction Employers Association. Tim's resume is in there. And then I had sent these to everyone last night, but then also Harriet and I spoke last week, and she had recommended Holly Harlan, whose bio I just got this morning, and Holly's bio is in front of you as well. So these are the candidates for the 9th spot. I think we just need to vote, and we've talked about the parameters that we're seeking in this person. I think there is some general feeling that it's another business person. We have no representation from a very large business at this point. And the other sector that people had talked about was the biomedical sector. And we did actually have some folks that had, I think, called in from both UH and the clinic, but rather than pick between the two giants, we stuck on the business side of the equation. So.
You want a motion?
Sure.
I think, as been pointed out, some excellent candidates, but looking at just what Dorothy referred to, one, larger business, two, given the importance of the medical profession here and the fact that the 2 largest private employers are UH and the clinic, I would move on Jay Mazelski as the 9th person, with Phillips, which does a lot of medical equipment making and selling in this area.
I'll second that.
Okay. Discussion on that motion? Sure. Harry.
I'd like to say I think I agree with Bruce that we have some excellent candidates, quite diverse, really. I know Holly's name came in late, but I just wanted to mention, and I agree that Mazelski would be an excellent person. I just want to throw in that I think Holly represents this kind of, she's in a cutting edge field. There's a lot of excitement and a lot of dynamism in this arena, and I think that I just wanted to speak up and say that that kind of excitement, that kind of dynamism, and the magnet it would be for young people, not just to stay in Cleveland, but to actually come to Cleveland. I think that's a reason that she is a good candidate, and I think she also gives a little bit of, she would join me in my gender here, but she's been in economic development many, many years and is well known to everybody around the table. So I just want to mention that, although I would agree with Bruce that Mazelski is an excellent candidate.
And we'll keep going. I mean, as we have I mean, we'll take a vote on this motion after discussion is done with it, and then if it doesn't pass, we'll entertain other candidates. Does that sound fair? Any other comments? Mayor? Go ahead, Mayor.
So the process is that we either vote yes or no and then entertain another.
I'm open to anything different if you'd like.
I just want to know it so I would know, because I wanted to recommend Mr. McNair. So I just want to know when would be the appropriate time.
Well, why don't you go ahead and make your case for him, and then that will maybe inform people as to whether or not they think there's a superior candidate than the one that has been nominated.
Darryl McNair is the one I would recommend. You can see his resume and the organizations he's involved in and the businesses that he's run. He's currently a businessman. I just believe he would be a great candidate.
Any other? Yes, sir.
Yes. Yeah, just my comment. We can't go very far wrong with the quality of individuals that are willing to step forward. My only comment on Jay Mazzelski is that he does bring in a different point of view in that we don't have the larger business, but he also brings in the medical device. And when you look at the charter, the county charter, going through the preamble, on the preamble it indicates economic development is one of the major items, but it also indicates in item 6 on the preamble that international and globalization as far as where we need to be as an organization. And Phillips, being an international organization, is probably one of the largest manufacturing companies, and the ripple benefit of that is they're making the MRIs right here in town. They were just installed, I believe, at University Hospital, just put in like $35 million worth of equipment that was made right at the top of the hill at Highland. And so it gives us some natural synergy between the medical mart, the hospitals that are utilizing it, the manufacturing facility, and then ultimately the ripple jobs that I would see would ripple off the heat treaters, the assemblers, all of the products and processes that go into it. To me, it brings in a nice full package for us to complement our 9th person.
Any other discussion on this motion? I just would add, I think I know just about all the folks whose names have been submitted, a couple of them pretty well. I know Holly, and I've heard presentations from her before, and I know she's excellent. I know Mr. McNair also, and if we had more appointments, I would probably vote to add them. I actually do not know Jay Mazzelski, but to me that's the most compelling deficit. You could identify other deficits that are on the commission, but that's the most compelling deficit that I see in terms of skill set that's on the commission. So I'll probably be voting for him. Any other comments or questions before I'll call for a vote?
Well, I also want to speak up for just to mention that Linville is the head of the CEA, and that is the Union Contractors Association. So that brings, a labor and a management support for his candidacy too. So it just is an example of how many good candidates we have for this position.
They are. That's definitely the case. Any other questions or suggestions?
Yeah, the only comment I have is this was the same problem we had when we were trying to select Brian Hall. We selected Brian Hall because we had 8 quality candidates in that round too. So it's a good thing that these people are willing to step forward.
Okay. All those in hearing any further questions? All those. The motion has been made and seconded to appoint Jay Mazzelski, and all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Abstain? All right. So by my count, it passes by 4 to 2. That's who we have present. So if we could notify Dorothy, if you could notify him about the next meeting, and we'll try to get him up to speed as quickly as we possibly can. Next item on the agenda, talking about goals and metrics.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Since it was 4 to 2, I'd like to add my name to supporting.
Sure.
I'll do the same.
Yeah. Sure. Well, we'll take another motion to just. I mean, it really was. It was the sense of the commission that there were multiple well-qualified candidates, and
Right.
no,
It wasn't
no
against it.
Right.
No,
That's correct.
no. So I guess we could take we don't have to get too procedural here, but the sense of the commission is that there's unanimous support for him as a quality candidate that will make a real contribution to the commission. Speaking of making a contribution to the commission, I should have also recognized from the audience are you officially confirmed yet, Larry, or not? Okay.
Soon,
never mind. No, but hopefully soon. But he's my designee to be the head of our economic development department. And that's Larry Benders. I know many of you are familiar with him, but he's going to be working very closely. He's already worked with Mayor Jackson on other issues, but we're happy to have him here as he works with us in this whole process. Next thing on the agenda is just a discussion of goals and metrics. Dorothy, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so you've got a PowerPoint at the bottom of your little stack there, and I think the folks in the audience have it as well. And what I thought I would do today is walk through this, because as we get closer to completing the outline, as we complete the outline of the plan, and you saw an outline of the plan after the last meeting, it reflected the discussion. I would like to send you the next iteration, but the discussion about the goals and objectives and then some proposed actions is really what I need from you to hone in on that. And then think about, while we're discussing, that we've got one meeting on April 13th, so we have to decide what's the best thing to do with that meeting. That's only a couple weeks away. There's a meeting on May 4th, which would be the meeting that you'd have a draft plan that you would reviewed, and then we'd come back on May 25th with the plan that you would approve to send to council on June 1. So we're getting pretty close here. I'm working very closely with Larry Benders, and also have been talking to multiple folks around the community and the region. So I'm starting to hone in on both, what are our goals, what are we going to measure, and then what actions are we going to take, and most of these are near-term actions. And then one other introductory remark, I actually did find the Generation Foundation did produce a directory of all the nonprofits that are in economic development. There's like 630 organizations in this directory. It's from about 2006, so it's not been updated for a while. The folks at Cleveland State said they could update it, but the other thing is these are all online. If it were updated, it could serve as the one-stop shop for people to be able to go in and get really confused about what they want to do if they're trying to get into economic development or trying to get some help. But I just wanted to note that, and I'll pass it around. I only have one copy of it. It's an outdated publication. So I just want to review where we've been so far. So I've had at least one conversation with each of you and about 40 additional community leaders. We've created and reviewed the plan framework and gathered input. So after the last meeting, I was using what I sent out to you as a walking around paper, and have developed more from that, which I will send out after I get your input from today. I'll send it out again. I've taken a look at the existing programs and the metrics at the Department of Development. We've reviewed economic development initiatives in the broader region of Northeast Ohio to be sure that the plan is set within that context. And I think that's really important. The Cuyahoga County doesn't sit on its own in a economy on its own. It crosses the borders, and we have people coming in and out of this regional economy that's about $170 billion gross product. And so we have to be sure that we're connected to the rest of the region. What we're going to talk about today is kind of a melding of all these ideas and stacks of paper that people have sent me with their comments, and it's been terrific. It's just sometimes overwhelming to try to pull it all together. And then we're going to modify this plan as we move forward. If you turn to the mission and vision page, this is really the vision is the same with a couple of tweaks that you saw the last time, and but the mission is I don't think I had a mission on the last statement, and I think that the head of the Cleveland Municipal School District actually did suggest one, so I'd written that down. But I've proposed this mission because what we're looking to do is improve the county's economic competitiveness through business growth, and ensure that Cuyahoga County is a vibrant, dynamic, and welcoming place. So there's two halves to this. One is the growth of businesses, and then the other will be built around this quality place-based development. And if we think that's right, then we might want to wordsmith some, but what you're going to see following here is taking those two halves a little bit separately. They have to be woven together at the end of the day, but that's where I'm headed here. Erin?
You'll smile because this is, of course, what I would say. It would be nice to have a reference to jobs in here, because after all, everybody always says we want this tax abatement because we're going to create jobs. I mean, I think business growth is good. I'm for that, but I'm also for the importance of the creation of jobs.
I think that's absolutely right, and you'll notice that at the bottom of that page it says to what end or what measurable outcome, because once we figure out what that is, then we can come back and add what we're aiming toward. If it's jobs, that's exactly what we should say in here. But I wanted to be sure that we had the discussion about where we're headed and what we want to measure, and then that will come back and reflect that.
Well, it does refer to a strategic job.
In the vision.
Right.
In the vision,
Right.
yeah, exactly. So in the vision statement,
Okay.
and this again was taken from the work of the Transition Task Force, saying that we must innovate, educate, collaborate, and invest resources strategically to create jobs, opportunity, and prosperity for all the residents of Cuyahoga County. So again, that doesn't give us, doesn't set out the vision to what we're reaching for, but it.
Dorothy, you've known me well enough to know I sort of believe in mission statements for about 10 minutes and then you go back to, but just a suggestion that maybe what we really
Sure.
mean is economic growth, not business growth.
Okay.
I think that captures businesses, but I think that captures others as well. Other opportunities as well.
Okay. Let's move on, and we can come back to this if you want to. These can be modified once we get through the conversation. So if we're thinking about goals and metrics, I would like you to think about these in time horizons. So the short term, we've got to do a 5-year plan, but in the short term, most of what we're going to talk about today is in that first year, because I think that's where we should focus, at least for the moment. The midterm, let's call that year 2, and then the long term is 3 to 5 years where we sit. And the reason for that is because we're in the midst of dramatic change. We've got a new county government, we've got state budget cuts and changes at the Department of Development in Columbus, a whole new department being formed in Jobs, Ohio. We've got a dramatic impact of the state budget on the 59 municipalities in Cuyahoga County, and we're in this economic recovery that is happening, but it's not yet real strong. So we're going to have to take a look at all those variables as we move through this, and although it's a 5-year plan, it's renewable every year. So if you flip to page 5, I'm asking the question, what should we measure based on these 2 mission themes? And if it's economic growth or business growth, that's one, and then the quality place-based development. So the ultimate measure of economic development is per capita income, and we know that in this county that our per capita income isn't where it should be, and it's been declining, particularly in the last couple of years. But that's a long-term measure, and so we've got to measure what we're actually going to do. And the other thing is that whatever we measure has to be aligned with the county stat process that's being put in place. So I have 2 measures that I think that represent both this economic or business growth piece and the place-based piece, and these are jobs. So coming back, Harriet, to what you said, jobs created and retained, and we should be measuring them all the time, short, mid, and long term. But another that's vitally important to the county, and it could be something we want to think about, because most of the investments the county makes are in properties. Either we're cleaning them up or refurbishing them or getting them ready for businesses to expand. And so the increase in tax value of the properties in which Cuyahoga County invests and the surrounding values of the properties might be something to take a look at. Probably would be, be a challenge to get that metric up and running, but it would maybe do the job.
Can I ask, if I may?
Sure.
What's included in business growth?
Yeah. So one thing that you can measure is if you have a set of programs, which the county does at this point, loan programs similar to the cities, and we work in a coordinated fashion, it would be if you invested in a company that was going to create 200 new jobs, then you would count those 200 jobs as business growth, because the investment allowed them to expand the plant so that they could do that. Or some of the companies, actually, there's a new product development loan fund that's run by Magnet, and so they make loans to manufacturers to launch a new product, and they will just count the jobs then from the production of that new product. So it would be that.
Now, would inclusion be part of business growth as you're measuring whether or not we're successful, because you could have those business growth and not have it grow in other communities, and to me that would not be full growth. It would be pretty much the same thing as we move
Exactly.
forward. So how would you?
We could take that and we could have measurable growth of inclusion, because you want all the residents of the county to prosper in this. So if we wanted to have an inclusion measure, that we could do that.
It would seem to me that if we were measuring all of the county and the impact of our investments on the county, that it would include, everybody.
And we could measure job growth overall.
Well, wealth creation, not necessarily jobs. We're talking about business. We're talking about business growth.
Exactly.
And then you have, one of the things you're talking about is job creation, but that's under the business growth. So business growth, people, wealth doesn't equate necessarily to a job. It equates to opportunities for business growth.
Yes, and actually, so one of the things, and we can talk about this in the place-based side, the place-based is not where I'm most familiar, but I'm learning a lot about this, but actually there's research that shows that actually improving housing stock in neighborhoods will actually lead to, first of all, you give families homes, and you can do that across a spectrum of price range. And that also leads to job creation, not only in the building, the construction, but the follow-on and the goods and services that people purchase once they move into these newer refurbished homes. So that would be another place where we could measure job growth, and there could be an inclusion measure there as well.
And I am beating a dead horse, but I'm talking about entrepreneurship.
Right.
The wealth is in the ability to give a job, not to get one. So if people are able to give a job, particularly in those areas where you said they have a difficult time for employment, it would seem to me that those people who are part of that group would be more likely to give the job. So we're talking about business growth, entrepreneurs, and how do we as a county measure whether or not we're moving that agenda forward, which will move the jobs and the quality of life and the housing and all that.
So one way is the next bullet. So there's another 4 bullets there on that page, and so one way to measure that is, are people, if you're talking about entrepreneurs, they usually go out and seek investments for their business. So one way to think about that is, are other people investing at the same time, or are people investing more dollars on top of that? So how much money has a county investment leveraged? And when they get more dollars into a company and they move these things from a prototype to a production model, and then they start to produce them, then there's more opportunity for jobs, and that requires money. So one of the things you could track would be the follow-on investments in companies or initiatives that the county has. Jack?
Yeah, Dorothy, one of the things I think that the successful businesses are also looking to do is, when they're innovation, it's not necessarily even with product, it's with process. As I've talked about, that the process itself could yield, with the dollars invested, actually less jobs theoretically at that operation, because it's going to produce at a higher level of productivity. So we should be measuring the productivity, because the jobs that we might be measuring are the follow-on jobs that come at some other corporation's background. It might be at the robotics organization that would install the robot. It may be at the maintenance companies that come in and do the maintenance of those automation type pieces of equipment. And there's a whole new level of service jobs that are going to sit outside of the one we actually invest in. So we need to follow the whole paper trail all the way back to where does that job, because the ripple jobs are some of the ones, that's where your entrepreneurs are they're gonna step up to the plate and say, hey, I can start a business doing X, Y, and Z to support these things.
And if you take a look at the dashboard that the Fund for Economic Future uses, they measure per capita income, they measure productivity, they do measure job growth. So there are a number of things that we can measure.
But I didn't see that on your metrics. I didn't see productivity.
I did not, yeah, I didn't, it should be there. You're absolutely right. I didn't. So the question is, will we have multiple measures or a single measure? And that's one of the questions, but.
I'm sorry.
I'm glad Joe mentioned suggested that we replace business with economic growth, because, and I want to speak to the mayor's point about inclusion. I just want to throw this out for purposes for discussion purposes, but what about something that says reduction in poverty as a metric? Because we all know that we can't have we can't have a lot of poverty and be a thriving, force. Poverty at some level needs to be addressed in any economic development discussion. We don't have to focus on it necessarily, but it should be part of the, and I'd like to see some mention, whether it's in the form of inclusion or something about reducing poverty. I think that would be, I just want to throw that out for discussion.
Well, I think implicit in all this, if you have business growth or economic growth, create jobs, that in turn is going to address the poverty issue.
Well, I think
depends.
I think that the problem, look, the poverty rate should be an indicator that we're paying attention to and that we're tracking, and we try to have programs that address it, whether they be economic programs or social services programs. I think the question, you get into whether or not what you're doing is going to be able to be measured in terms. So let's say you give out $25 million to tech businesses. That could be a fantastic success, and they could double their payroll. But you may not see that in the poverty rate. I mean, it's certainly a hopefully will be part of the solution to poverty, but I think it's not taking anything away from, because I think that's really the issue when you get down to it, is that the reason that we have an economic development strategy, or are going to try to form one, is because we have too much poverty. I mean, that's the bottom line. For those that are doing well, they're already doing well. We don't need to worry about it. So really, that's what it's all geared to. I just think we have to be careful in terms of measuring what we're doing. It's going to be tough to have kind of a one-to-one ratio with that. I mean, I'm not opposed to it, but I think we've got to. If we're going to evaluate the millions of dollars we'll spend over the next 4 years, I don't know that you'd get a lot of that out of that particular number. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's just kind of what I'm thinking.
So it's hard to show cause and effect with
that's what I mean,
we're doing.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
a better way to say it.
That's really difficult. But I should say, and I have.
If I may, but it is easy to show cause and effect if you have inclusion and you address poverty.
Yeah.
There is
I was just throwing it
direct
open
correlation.
for discussion.
Yeah, so actually, the metric that the Fund for the Future uses with that, they have a metric that measures racial inclusion and income equality, and it's a ratio that they compare. So if they look at Northeast Ohio, this is income inequality. So we have a ratio in 2008 of 5.68, and the top Midwest peer region that they measure us again is Minneapolis, which is 4.70. Lower is better on this ratio. So I think in that case, we could ask if the Fund for the Future, because this is all done by it's a group from the Fed and the universities, could break out Cuyahoga County, and we could track that as part of what we want to do. I think, though, that we couldn't say that whatever this commission decides to do from an economic development and investment standpoint was the only thing that would impact that. Is that?
Dorothy, just a question. If we go back to the slide before, we said that most of what we were going to be talking about today was year one.
Right.
It seems to me we may decide that there are 5-year goals, some of the ones we've already talked about, but wouldn't we be wise to set some metrics or goals for the first year, which are going to be very different than any of the things we've talked about so far, really? I mean, it might be, I'm just throwing one out, might be, were we able to invest more dollars in economic development this year than last year? Just things that could actually be measured in the course of 12 months.
Right.
That could be helpful both to both of you at that end of the table. Especially per capita income growth, as you know, is something that even economists will tell you it takes several years to measure. So we shouldn't run away from those. We shouldn't run away from inclusion measures. But it seems like we need some short-term metrics along with short-term strategies.
Yes.
At the risk of getting too specific, but to follow on, Joe, your comments, I've thought that the inclusion of getting all 56 of those companies that have committed to the medical mart to plant some kind of a seed here, whether it be their call center, some kind of operation, something to recognize that they've gone the next step beyond the kiosk, beyond the exhibit space, to actually committing to Northeastern Ohio. If we can set a target that we're going to have 20% of those organizations have some kind of location in Northeastern Ohio, it's the kind of measurable goals you can do perhaps within the first year. And they've already committed to having some kind of a presence here, so let's push them to make that next commitment. I don't know if that follows on is that too specific for the first year, but it's a measurable goal.
Anything else on this longer term or the metrics? It's not an easy question, but at least I wanted to have the dialogue so that people are thinking about what we're going to measure. Because next we move into these core themes and some of the first year actions, proposed actions. Is anything else on the?
Well, did we agree that we will try to develop metrics for the first year? I mean, does that?
Yeah, I think that you'll see in these actions that we're proposing, you can measure those, but I do also think that we want to think about what are we trying to impact over time, and per capita income, the inclusion, and income equality. So we want that disparity in per capita income to narrow, and we want to grow the economy as measured either by the gross product of the county, recognizing it's part of a $170 billion regional economy. So we can tease out a number of metrics. We just gave a few productivities, another one, Jack, that we may want to do, and we're going to have to come back to that question, I think, over the longer term, but I just wanted to put it out there for some thought. Let's move to page 6. So the core themes of the vision, and we went over this the last time, were the innovate, educate, collaborate, and invest. And so what I've put here, and we may need to go further into the document to enlighten folks on these, but on the innovation side, we've been creating this innovation ecosystem in the region for a long time with groups like Nortec and Jumpstart and Magnet and everybody looking at how do we be more innovative and how do we get more products and processes, either technology-based or service-based or whatever. And again, you'll see a little bit later when we get to the innovation and entrepreneurship part, there's some specific recommendations, but the county has to determine how it can best contribute to this regional innovation ecosystem. On the educate side, it's a little more clear because there was a promise both in the campaign and I believe in the charter that we're going to design a collaborative scholarship program with regional colleges and universities, and Ed, correct me if I don't have the wording right on this, but that will provide opportunities to pursue the best fit post-secondary education and training for county resident students. And so there is, you know, there is a goal to put a scholarship fund out there, and I think that is in the current year. Is that, am I?
Well, the charter doesn't say when we have to do it, and it doesn't really say what it is either. It just says it's going to be some kind of scholarship assistance program. It doesn't really define it. And what we've been having meetings about is we didn't want to have a model where we would just cut checks to people that think that they want to go to Tri-C and take some classes, because what we've seen from the data, and we're still studying it, but what we've seen is college really is not a goal in and of itself. I mean, it's fine, but if you're going to go to college for a semester or two, be taking mostly remedial classes and then drop out, we're not really achieving the goals that we've really set for society, which is try to give people an education that's going to get them into the middle class. So what we're talking about doing, well, first of all, a couple different things. One is we have started to have conversations with all the different public and private universities in the area. And they all do this a little bit in their own way and in different ways. And they all kind of bring a different piece of the puzzle and different options for students. And they also have some resources that they already put out there. But it's kind of a patchwork. We are also looking at, you know, we do want to provide some financial assistance, and I'm going to give the State of the County address in a few days, but I've been working with my Office of Budget Management about providing some financial capacity for that. I think we figured out a way to do that. We can talk about it later if you'd like. But then the third thing is just that I think it makes more sense, instead of just saying how do we get kids to college, it's more what is this child going to do with their life when they leave high school. And for some of them that will mean college, and for some of them it might mean vocational education. Some of it might mean directly going to work for an employer. And we've got to figure, it's more of a life strategy for that person as they enter the workforce or become a full-time student. And so we're going to try to marry some of those different programs that are out there. That's what I think probably makes more sense than just strictly saying we'll figure out a way to finance a couple semesters of community college, because that's not. I think everybody, including the folks at Tri-C, would say that's not getting us where we need to be.
And in this, actually, I took some of this language right from the Gates Foundation's post-secondary education goals, where it isn't college for everyone, so it's kind of the best fit post-secondary. So after you finish high school, what's the best thing to get you educated or trained for what you're going to do? And they talk about it as a meaningful career meaningful job by the time you're age 26 is kind of the goal of that activity. But
I think it's important always to say whenever you have those conversations, that's not to say that we're going to be limiting people's options in terms of who wants to say they want to be a university student. If somebody says that that's what they want to do, that's fine. We're not going to be saying, no, you're going into vocational, you're not. But it's providing additional options.
Exactly.
It's not going to be a two-tiered system where you have, you know, the wealthy are going to go to college and the poor are going to go into vocational. I mean, but there have to be, it's a recognition that there have to be more options and that are coordinated in a different way.
On Joe's comments about first year, is this one that we might want to push off to a longer term and say this is going to be part of our 3-year or 2 or 3 years, so we're not trying to accelerate the pace of something that's maybe not doable in the first year of a scholarship and program, other than to have it on our thinking chart as opposed to a solution.
Something in the first year we hopefully launch. We're not going to see, at least get it underway since already doing some.
I think we're going to be able to provide some resources for it this year. How soon it's going to be, at least start laying the groundwork to start creating kind of an endowment to start to do it. Whether or not we're going to have kids, you know, I don't think we're going to have kids going this fall. I don't think that's going to happen, but I don't think it's something where it's going to be 3-4 years away. I think we're going to be able to start putting something in place in terms of, at least in terms of funding it. I hope.
Good. So we can maybe stage that. I mean, obviously year 2 and 3 to 5, it will hopefully grow, but I think I can get some additional language around that. Anything else on the educate?
Well, just for the longer term, the mid and longer term, it isn't, we're not restricted to this one collaborative scholarship program, right? I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff in education that is important that I'm hoping in the years 3 to 5 we can expand, right? I mean.
Yeah, that's
more
just
to
one
education
part.
than a
Oh, sure.
scholarship program.
Yeah.
That's just
Yeah.
one part of it, sure.
Okay, on the Collaborate side, I've had many meetings around the region and in particular the Fund for the Future and others want to be sure that as we put out this vision for Cuyahoga County that it's within the context of the Northeast Ohio economy. So I've talked about working with the Director of Regional Collaboration, Ed Jurst, the Mayors and Managers Association, and Advanced Northeast Ohio supporters to articulate this vision for the county within the context of this regional economy. And I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with that. It's just how, we'll need to measure what we're doing and to do that. But it does, everyone wants to be sure that whatever Cuyahoga County does fits. On the investment side, and here's one where we can have a little bit more conversation. So this is to understand and begin the sincere collaborative efforts to design the optimum use of county gaming revenues and other revenue streams that will be available in 2012, and then seek a partnership with the City of Cleveland to coordinate joint opportunities to dedicate those revenue streams. So,
Well, I just want to make a comment about that. I've gotten increasingly skeptical about how soon, especially since we're talking about first year priorities, how soon we're going to have hard numbers when it comes to the casino revenue. We've had, and I don't know if other people at the table want to say that publicly or talk about it here, but there's a lot of variables at work there, and you're talking about within the next year. I think it's unlikely that either the city or the county or the other entities that are going to be entitled to a portion of the casino revenues are actually going to start realizing that revenue in a predictable way. And it's important to be predictable. So, for instance, when we've talked about the concept, it's been discussed publicly before that you would take gaming revenues and you would use those as a bondable revenue stream. I think that could be years away, to be honest with you, because you keep in mind the fact that you've got, okay, Cleveland phase one is going to be the first one open. All of that money goes into a pool, and the recipients, the way I understand it, the recipients across the state draw from that pool. So that means Columbus and Cincinnati and their school districts and their counties are all taking from just what the phase one revenues are. And no disrespect to the estimates that have been made, but that is not an exact science. So all we know for sure is that ours will probably be the first one open, but it's only phase one, and it's going to be shared with the whole state, and it's unclear what those revenues are going to be. Then the other ones slowly start to come onto line. Then you usually have a phenomenon when the first year of a casino sometimes is its best, because it's new and it's different, and people aren't used to losing their money there yet, and they can't wait to do it, and then it gets a little old for some of them after a while. But you also have people across the country that haven't been to the casino before and they want to experience it for the first time. And I'm just saying it doesn't mean that it doesn't continue to grow over time, but it just makes it a little bit unpredictable. So, sure.
In the uncertainty in terms of all of our financial situation based on what's recently proposed at the state.
Well, that's absolutely the case. I mean, we know it's going to be bad. We just don't know how bad it's going to be in terms of state funding. So that's adding to the uncertainty of it. It doesn't now. I have gone ahead and made a commitment publicly that I'm not going to use those revenues for any other purposes other than economic development. But when I have talked to folks that are in the banking business in terms of bonding that out, they have expressed skepticism in terms of how predictable that revenue stream is. So I think it is just a challenge that's going to be out there, certainly in the next year, for sure, if not more than that. It's a challenge to either have it so reliable that you can bond it out, or so reliable that you can even really predict what you're going to have from year to year to design your programs and how much money it's going to generate. So I just think that's a difficulty.
Dorothy, I don't disagree with that. One thing, though, that is related to gaming that maybe your county development chief designate knows something about is we do know for certain that there's $200 million of state funding available for workforce programs. Having a point of view as to how that money could best be used in Cleveland and Cuyahoga County, and then using our resources to advocate on that behalf, is something that is predictable and something that could actually be in the next 12 to 18
That's an excellent
So
point.
that maybe is, for year one, a much more relevant and immediate opportunity. You know something about workforce, don't you, Claire?
And I think part of that's for internships too, isn't it?
Yes. But it's right now pretty vague. I think it can be massaged a lot.
Okay, good. All right, let's go to 7. What you have here is just, it's not even a Cliff's Notes version, it's just a listing of the development tools that we have at the moment. So before we get into the discussion on business retention, expansion, and attraction, I just wanted to put these out for you. So the two fundamental pieces of the economic development tools of the department are the brownfield assessment and cleanup funds, and then these other funds that are used primarily for business growth. And they go through a variety of different programs. I don't want to jump into them, but just to let you know that that's what's there. And then the prospect, and some of these are allocated from year to year. Some of these funds come from the federal government, some of them come from the County General Revenue Fund, and in particular, there's a new product innovation loan fund that we talk about a little bit later in partnership with Magnet, the North Coast Opportunities Fund in partnership with Jumpstart. We've got the Cuyahoga County Innovation Zones program, which is what has funded the Health Tech Corridor activity and has been proposed for this Project Galaxy, the NASA Space Station Laboratory, and then the future $100 million Economic Development Fund, which is the site that if all the revenues came in as projected from the casinos, we could have at some point a $100 Economic Development Fund. So that's those are the primary tools that the development works with now on the economic development side. So if you turn to page 8, again, I'm trying to get some sense for these immediate actions.
Dorothy, real quick though, could you, for the committee, you don't have to do it now, maybe give us a sense over the last couple of years as to the value, dollar value
Yes.
of these programs, so we can get a sense moving forward?
I actually have those, and
Okay.
I will lay those out for the last 3 or 4 years for everybody, so
Thanks.
that you can.
Thanks.
Yeah, I will absolutely do that.
While doing that, is there any way to look at the dollar value of some of the nonprofits that you think are impacting? As long as you're going to bring in the dollar value of the programs that are actually in place, is there any way to look at that component too? I know
All 600.
All 600.
well, the ones, no, let's focus on the old 80-20 rule, and I'll be willing to bet you that more than 80% of the dollars are sitting in 20% of the programs. And if you could focus on that. And I know Mr. Bender, in his confirmation hearing, brought this concept up as far as the idea of maybe being a facilitator of, to help facilitate that consolidation, or at least that concept we're looking at. Bender, sorry, I didn't put the S on, I apologize.
I think we can take a look at that. I can certainly give you the history of the county programs, and we can get the budget numbers. We've done that once before. I've gone to the Fund for the Future, and I mean they fund probably the biggest of those economic development organizations.
Well, the 990s are all available.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on that? Let's take a look at these early actions. So I've looked at a number of different plans from organizations and actually read through the stuff that was brought from Pittsburgh, the Allegheny County, and whether or not this could be done in the next, before the draft of the plan or the plan goes to council, I'm not sure. But I haven't had the resources to do it. But this would be surveying businesses regarding their needs to enable their growth and ensure retention through a couple of different channels. One would be, and we talked about this last time, interview companies directly and send, you might want to interview, I don't know, 50 to 100 and some, and then just send questionnaires to a number of others. And then the second would be meet with and look to the chambers, with GCP being the largest, and other business groups within the smaller municipalities to learn their members' needs. So somehow we've got to get a survey of what the business needs are. And Joe, I think that you've talked a bit before about working with GCP on these, in particular, retention and expansion activities. You might want to.
Well, only that right now we do a lot of that. I would just suggest that, which is a part of the reason behind the way the state is moving with Jobs Ohio, it may not be the best use of time for county people to interview companies in the sense that, let's just play this out. Is that necessarily going to be the first place that a business says they have an issue or a problem, as opposed to maybe doing that in a different way? So it's just, I think the notion is correct. The process maybe needs some real thoughtful work.
How would you go about it? It seems to me that I think we all agree that the business are the ones going to create the jobs. And that's the way we want to get them in here, keep them, get more in here. If we at least take those that are here now and see what it takes to get them to not only stay but to grow, and where.
I'm not debating that. I'm just not saying it may not be the best use of time for county staff to be out doing that. I think we might, either through chambers of commerce, local or otherwise, that might be a better way to accumulate that information.
I think that information is important to have.
Isn't it true that Employment Connection is in the process of doing that now, and that's both city and county? So now we have Mr. Benders here, so we could. It's a successful function now, so it might just be, why reinvent the wheel?
That's really only, unless I'm mistaken, it's only on one piece of a business operation, workforce.
Oh, I see.
As opposed to many other needs, capital and so forth.
But to follow on Harriet's comment, though, I think Mr. Benders went through like robocalls and other techniques that are technology-driven, that if you build in the other couple pieces you're talking about, at least the database is there, the call centers are there, the businesses are there, so perhaps you can accelerate to use the database and just put a different queue off the automation calls, which we don't have time to do. Like, I agree with you on that, Joe, but there are other techniques of maybe getting feedback.
Okay, so it looks like it's going to be an indirect method and not going directly to companies, and that's fine, because however we can get it done, I think it does. We've got to get this broader perspective on what the businesses need. The other piece of this is to determine how best to partner with these organizations, and Jack, this is maybe the organizations, some of them that you're talking about, to try to get some sense for what they're investing in business retention and expansion, certainly as part of the whole picture.
Yeah, it's not 120, but my guess is you maybe even get less of the 600 in there. So your 80-20 maybe will be even a smaller group sample.
And again, it's a matter of, and it will be Mr. Benders just going out, because they're all eager to talk about what they do and how they do it. If we move on to page 9, the expansion and retention continued. this was a suggestion that came in. We have a land bank that's dealing with the vacant housing issue and taking the vacant lots from there, but the countywide industrial land bank to take a look at some of these industrial sites that are there, and working with the Mayors and Managers Association to take a look at those throughout the county to see if there's a land banking opportunity there. Okay. Another, work with the regional banks to discuss and address the business working capital needs, and the banks have offered that, so I think that's another one of those immediate issues that we know, based on the when the president visited, that working capital is a huge issue, and the opportunity is there. The banks are prepared to sit down and talk. The other thing, this goes, and Will, we talked about the plan that the port is doing, and maybe expanding the port for exports, and certainly exporting more from the region as businesses grow is something we want to do to bring new dollars in. So is there a role for the county to play to help to expand exports with the regional businesses? You know, what might that be? Business attraction, determine what role the county will play in business attraction, both domestic and international, in partnership with Team NEO. We've had some meetings with them. I think one of the things to note is I was reading some data last night, and in typical regions, only about 2% of the job growth comes from businesses that are attracted. The rest of it comes from retaining and expanding the businesses that you have. 98% of it comes from those two. You know, it was 56 and 42. I just don't remember which one was which, but primarily it's business expansion and retention that matters. Let's move on to page 10, and just stop. You know, if you want to jump in and say something, just go ahead. But let me just keep walking us through this. The other piece of this are regional clusters of industry and innovation that we've been working on for several years in the region, and actually the county took a leadership role with one of those, the offshore wind energy and activity, and now there's a Great Lakes Energy Task Force that is that's taking care of that has actually spun off the lead to this offshore wind development company, LeadCo. And the county and many other counties and organizations are a partner. But we do have bioenterprise looking at the biomedical and healthcare industry. You've got Magnet that's been assigned by the state, the charge for the automotive industry, and then also they take care of manufacturing across a number of industries. Nortex, solely focused on advanced energy and flexible electronics at this point, and we've got an aerospace institute out by NASA that looks at that aerospace cluster. So those are the clusters that we already have groups taking a look at. What role might we be able to play with those groups? And then one additional cluster activity that's been being pursued by CASE, Cleveland State, the County Planning Commission, the Great Lakes Science Center, the Cleveland Foundation, Sustainability 2019, the list goes on and on. I think there are 500 different groups looking at the watershed system and things that go into it. But we've had innovation around water in this community for many years. There may be an opportunity for the county, as it did with wind energy, to be the convener around water. Again, just a suggestion. And this is something that both Cleveland, the Gun Foundation, I actually saw Dave Abbott walking over here, has been a, and it looks like when I typed those in, I left out gun, which has been the primary driver, so I'll fix that. That's pretty funny. And the primary advocate is left them out.
Does it make sense to add WireNet to Magnet, the line on Magnet?
Yes, absolutely it does, because WireNet and Magnet are working together on a new EDA proposal.
Prism
yeah.
program.
Yeah. And Jackie, I don't know if you want to say anything about that, but that's a...
Well, it's to spur off innovation as far as from products and process to look at Heike and do that. But it's only aimed at the manufacturing sector as opposed to some of these other sectors. But again, it's aimed at innovation within product and process.
Right, and that's and the county works with them on that through this new product development loan program. On the entrepreneurship and innovation side, and here, you know, this is another review of these programs to determine the lessons learned in both the Product Development Loan Fund and the North Coast Opportunities Fund, which programs support and expand, which programs to discontinue, what existing and new programs might be funded from anticipated new economic development funds. So we've got some lessons that we've learned in participating in these already. We should take those to the next step and redefine around those. And then I've made a list of those again. With the last one being one that we haven't talked about, and that is on the third frontier investments, is there a particular role that the county might play, again with new dollars, on some of the clusters of innovation that are coming together out of third frontier funding? It's just a question that should be asked, because the region has gathered a number of things from, has been invested in heavily by the state out of third frontier, and there's another $700 million about to be invested. So how can we build on that? On the human capital side, we've already talked about the post-secondary education scholarship program, and then continuing to support and align with the Invest in Children activity. Also the employment connection, again, that this new demand-driven workforce matching system should be adequately funded and connected to whatever we're doing in economic development. So that really wraps up this, what I call the business growth, we can call economic growth, but it's primarily focused on growing businesses and jobs through innovation, looking at clusters and looking at how we're going to put programs in place to grow that piece of it. My transition here is that as I've been looking at some of the Brookings Institution Ohio Prosperity Report, they talk about 4 assets that drive large metropolitan economies like ours: innovation, human capital, and then infrastructure and quality places. So the next page defines those for you, but we're really moving now from this innovation and human capital piece to the infrastructure, the place-based thing. And just one thing to note on the infrastructure, we typically think about that in terms of roads, rails, seaports, airports, and moving people to and from jobs and goods back and forth to and from markets. But we also should think about broadband capacity, which Northeast Ohio has, and the federal government is investing about $60 million to enhance this broadband capacity in the region that will extend through 27 counties. And if you talk to anyone in Washington, they point to Cleveland and Northeast Ohio being probably the model region for broadband deployment on this one community network. So we should think about how that can enhance whatever we're doing on the place, quality of place side. And then again, just a definition for quality places. This is where I'm not as familiar, so this will not be as well thought out in terms of specifics, but there are plenty of people in the department and around the community who have this. So we've got a number of unique assets, and we want to make sure that they continue to be vibrant and visible, and that we're engaged and we've got sustainable communities. We want to be sure that our infrastructure is efficient and aligned with the economic development goals. So again, how do these two work together, the growth of businesses and the place-based things? The list of things that quality places require, I don't think there's anything foreign there. We're working on all those kinds of things. But if you go to the next page, I think we take a look now at these short-term actions that we need to do. Number one is just complete these 4 transformational projects that are underway downtown, and as you can see and hear, that's happening as we sit here. Around those, there's going to be infrastructure and amenities required to support them. So, and you know, you all know this better than I do in terms of what those are, but we should probably address these requirements in the economic development plan and what role the county will play. Again, that's the short term. And Jack, maybe it is just coming out and figuring out what those 56 members of the MedMart might do to establish some activity here. The lakefront development capacity, again, that's maybe the next step. The core city development with regional impact, we want to look at, there's probably a cluster of service jobs that are going to come out of these attractions that are going to create more jobs in hotels and restaurants and venues like the Rock Hall, the museums, Playhouse Square. Are we looking at that cluster of job creation and how the county might work on that? Again, that could be an employment connection activity. The CDCs have strategies for development outside of downtown. There's University Circle, Gordon Square. I looked at a very exciting plan from the campus district that would connect Tri-C and Cleveland State and put a campus atmosphere between the two of them. So how do we want to review and decide where the county might play in those? The county housing programs, so that we look at a more strategic investment plan. We probably have refurbished about 800 homes in the past year through the housing programs, the development block grant programs, and the neighborhood stabilization programs, which the latter are stimulus funded. We need to take a look at that more strategically, taking a look at how to do those investments instead of just one at a time. And again, this Center for Housing Policy showing that housing rehab does create jobs both during construction and afterwards. The 58 municipalities around the core city, and Bruce, you've talked about this, getting the economic development and community development folks, and in some cases that's the mayors together to say, what do you really need the county to be doing for you now, in particular with the cuts that are coming from the state budget. On the community development block grant funding, there's about $4.5 to $5 million that usually comes into the county for investment on that. How can we be sure that how we're investing those funds is commensurate with what we're doing in the creation of jobs and growing the economy? Again, a more strategically focused look at that. And to better align the economic, community, and housing development strategies with the land bank acquisition, demolition, and redevelopment strategies. On page 18, taking a look at the inventory of county assets. We've talked about the airport before, but is there a way that with new partnerships to boost service at that airport, realize more efficiencies, or create new revenues for development? And how does that airport fit with the airports that the city has as part of the regional system? Another place where there could be some dollars freed up for economic development would be to take a look at the real estate holdings of the county, to take a look if there's a sale or redeployment of any of those assets could result in redevelopment. And again, getting things to the highest and best use so that you're improving the property values, if that is one thing we want to measure.
Yeah, I want to talk about that for a second. I just want to throw this out for if any of you have suggestions, either right now or later to give to us. And the way the county used to dispose of property is, and the county is a big property owner. Unfortunately, we own several dozen properties all across the county. Some of them are well known, like the Ameritrust complex. Make me an offer, by the way, if anyone is interested. Mr. Pogue, aren't you looking for a retirement villa right in downtown? One of the ways that I think the county, and we've started to entertain proposals about some of those. We've had people come and pitch us for different proposals for different properties, and one of them made a good point. The way that it used to work with the county anyway was they would just kind of put a property on the market and see what would come in. And there's a certain limitation in that because you're limited by the RFP process itself in terms of saying, well, okay, because you've got to respond to what the RFP is. I mean, you've got to be able to justify the terms that you reach with somebody because they win a bid process, and there's a certain disadvantage to that because it It defines it in a certain way that can kind of limit what your options are in terms of developing that property. I think what might make more sense, and we're still trying to figure out how we would do this and comply with all the regulations that are out there, is say, listen, here are 40 different properties that we own. Let's throw it open to the private sector, and some of them are revenue generating, by the way, and most of them are not, but all of them are worth something. Give us creative proposals that might combine some of them, maybe standalone projects as some of them, but we're throwing it open in a very dramatic way and saying we're putting all this on the table. So if you have a creative idea where you think you can get some financing, let us know. And there may be other government entities that also have property that might want to be a part of that, whether it's a suburb, whether it's City of Cleveland, whether it's some other entity, whether it be a quasi-governmental entity, whatever it might be. And so that's something that we're kind of trying to put on the fast track. Those discussions did come out of the Ameritrust conversations, only because as we try to figure out what the next use for that property is going to be, we have to be very careful about the way we would RFP any of that, because you might be able, if you do it in too restrictive of a way, you'll actually defeat what might be the best use for that property. So we've been talking to some folks that we've had, that we've been working with our loan executive program, and it's been helpful. But we're looking for creative policy options when it comes to property. We're talking about millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of real estate, by the way. And we do not, generally, we do not want to be holding these properties. And it could also, the funds from that could be used to put into one of these other buckets that we would like to spend on economic development or early childhood education or scholarship or any of our other priorities. But I think, and I want to go back to this again, it can't just be that the county is the only one that's doing that. What I'd like to do is as we start to land on some policies that the county is going to do, we're always going to be looking to figure out if other entities can join with us in doing that. So if we're going to come up with an economic development fund, that's great, but if there are other entities, whether it's suburbs, other cities, City of Cleveland, the Port, that wants to join with us, it will create a larger investment pool. We don't have to, we're willing to make a contribution to things that we don't necessarily control 100%. And we're willing to do that because we know the county is going to be ultimately the beneficiary of it. Go ahead, yes, sir.
Picking up on that same
Sure.
theme, as far as, just for want of a better discussion, the Ameritrust building, if the RFP was out there that said also this is part of a county strategy, that at that corner we're looking to do something perhaps with the rotunda and keep that, and it might lend itself to a whole strategy how the developer sees that if we do our piece, they see logically that perhaps a hotel or condominiums or whatever it happens to be fits into our master plan as far as these buildings, the ones we're going to keep versus the ones that are going to move on.
Now see, I scared him off.
He knew the offer was coming pretty soon.
No, I think that's a great.
Look at the building.
He's rushing out there.
Snatch it up before
Put his
it's
claim in. I think that's a great point, because there are certain ways that East 9th corridor, I mean, you'd like to have and it will probably never have the flexibility the private sector would have, but you'd like to have the flexibility to have something that fits in with our goals for that whole part of downtown.
Yeah, because some of the conversations,
Sure.
that the rotunda becomes an entertainment piece and the building then becomes a natural link to that piece, whether it be hotels or condos or whatever goes in there.
Mm-hmm.
Good, so looking for some creative uses there. And then finally on this piece, there are a number of other initiatives going on that are place-based. And so again, it's, and I don't know these as well, so people can give me others, but you know, these are the ones that I've identified, and I'm sure there's more. So there's the reimagining a more sustainable Cleveland. It's the focus on the reuse of vacant land, much of that for gardening, but a lot of it maybe will fit into the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District's CSO attainment, where they're trying to get rid of 4.5 billion gallons of of annual combined sewer overflow, which is a kind of great afternoon thought, but that's all part of the Watershed and Lake Erie Preservation Initiative.
Let me jump into that. I just want to, again, I want to make the commission aware of some things that we're trying to do with that I think is going to be relevant for our planning process. On, I believe, April the 14th, I'm going to be convening on the stormwater overflow issue and the impermeable surface fee that is seeking to be charged by the sewer district. I was asked early on by both sides, by both the sewer district and by some of the municipalities that were not in agreement with what their plan to intervene on their side. And I said what was a couple things that were clear to me after reviewing the issue. Several things, actually. One is that there has been a lot of money spent on attorneys. It is getting close, the bill is getting close to $2 million between the sewer district and all the cities that are defending it. Secondly, that they haven't engaged in any real mediation or arbitration or discussion about settling the suit in quite some time. And as some of you may know, this time it's personal. I mean, they've gotten a little heated about their discussions about it, and that is not conducive to settlement. Third, there are whole swaths of the county that are not included in it because they don't get their service directly from the sewer district. They have their own water system, like my city in Lakewood. Actually, about 99% of my city. There's a little section down by the highway that does, but otherwise, we're not a party. We're not a party to it. At least as of yet, we're not a party to it. And there are whole other swaths of the county that are not. So in terms of having a uniform fee that includes the whole water table, you don't have it because you still have a divided authority between who is affected by what water system. Fourth, there are strategies that can be used when you spend that much public money. I mean, you're talking about when you include how much money would be spent on this, and then you include all the money that's going to be spent for just complying with the EPA mandates. It's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, it's billions before it's all over. You're correct. I mean, just in Lakewood, which is 55,000 people and 4.5 square miles, the original estimate was $400 million for EPA compliance. Now, we ended up not agreeing to that, and it's still under review, but it's going to be billions of dollars before it's all over. Is that expenditure of billions of dollars of public money integrated with an economic development strategy? It can be. And I think that there are and I've said this to the sewer district directly, so I think that there are other, and I don't think they would say that it isn't, but I would say that for those people in this room that have participated in coming up with economic development strategy, I have never heard a discussion of how that money is being integrated into an economic development strategy. I've never heard it. So if it's happening, it's a very closely guarded secret. So it's not happening. So there are all these opportunities. Now, what I asked them to do is, first of all, why don't you come together and start talking to each other, and we'll see if we can mediate it. So on April the 14th, we're actually at the county building. We're bringing together both sides of that on the stormwater side of it to try to stress the mediation. Both sides have agreed that they will. I shouldn't say all, there are multiple parties, but many of the major parties, being the sewer district and many of the suburbs that have taken a lead role in objecting to it, are at least agreeing to come down and talk. And I think that now, I'm not naive. I'm not saying they're going to walk out of there and the case is going to be settled, but at least we're going to try to get the process started. And I also think, in terms of what's particularly relevant for this commission, it's an opportunity to try to start to engage the sewer district about the way that money is spent. And that can be everything from what do you do with everything you dredge? Do you end up creating additional land on the lakefront? I mean, there's a million different possibilities. And we are by far I mean, we're certainly not the only city that's struggling with this, and there are many, many, many other examples. And Cincinnati is an interesting local example of how they are trying to integrate it into an urban strategy, development strategy. And I just think there are some lessons to be learned there that I do not think. I think it's a huge missed opportunity. We're acting like the sewer district is something we'd rather not think about. We'd rather not pay it. We'd rather not think about it. But it's amazing to me that there's been that much of an expenditure or proposed expenditure of public funds, and we haven't talked about what its relevance is to economic development.
Okay, so that's important. The other one that's coming around, there's a $4.5 million study that Hunter Morrison is leading to implement a plan that links the economic development to equitable housing, land use, transportation, and community development and infrastructure. So it's similar. It's all that part of that watershed piece. And then the health improvement partnerships, place matters with regard to public health issues, and some of the statistics on that are startling when you compare urban longevity to folks out in the suburbs, and then the sustainability 2019 effort. So again, those are all the place-based things that we need to weave together a little bit better. So in terms of the next steps, I have not, with the exception of taking a look at Allegheny County and 4 different plans that I understand they weren't picked as best practice plans. They were just picked because there were plans out there. I didn't realize that until just recently. So that still needs to be done. I could still use your input, and maybe one of the things you want to do is mark up your sheets and send them back to me, or give me a call and I'll come and debrief with you so that I know how to take this. I certainly got some input today, but not as much as I would have hoped. And then I should say that the County Planning Commission has been helpful. If you recall the outline that I sent that had all the upfront stuff that we didn't want to spend a lot of time on with history and the population and maps, I've got all that stuff that we'll make as part of an appendix, but I do want to send out another draft of that outline with trying to take what you said today and tweak these a little bit. And I would like to do that by the end of the week. I'm totally available this week if you want to have a phone call or want me to come out and talk with you just how, let's figure out how to get this to the next step.
Dorothy, just sort of one big thing that jumps out at me is, and I know you didn't even put everything in here that you could have, is just the degree of focus that we want to exert on this plan, especially in the first couple of years. I mean, what jumps out at me is that there's a couple of big buckets, and we can wordsmith this, but there's, and I think even county executive mentioned this in terms of being willing to, you don't have to control everything. There's a bucket of sort of supporting things that are already working, and by bringing the county's resources and talents and investments to that, it could be something even better. And then there's a set of projects that the county could initiate and lead. And to me, that's the one where we're going to have to be really careful, because you want to succeed, and if you pick 20 of those, you're not going to succeed. If we pick a few, we could. And it just seems like, I don't know how others feel about that, but just sort of an overall approach to how to eventually write something. I think those 2 buckets, and maybe there's a third, things we can't do now. I mean, everybody likes to talk about one of the most helpful things when you're doing a plan or trying to outline a strategy is, what are you not going to do so that you set people's expectations correctly? Doesn't mean they're bad things. It just means we can't succeed at everything to begin with, and so we have to be very focused.
Yes, sir.
Chairman, several times Dorothy mentioned or made reference to the mayors and managers, and this ties in with something else. 2 points I want to make. I talked to several of my colleagues, and when I report back to them about this commission, clearly there is an interest on the part of several mayors for us to convene those cities that have economic development directors. Now, not some of the smaller ones don't. In many cases, the mayors themselves serve in that role. So what I plan to do is to get a meeting together of those economic development directors and those mayors and just have a brainstorming session for them as to what they would like to see or what their needs are. But along that line, as we discussed a minute ago, as Joe said, we can't get the county people working all of these, concentrating on all of these interviewings and whatnot, but I think it is so critical to talk to, as exhaustive as we can get in the time frame we have, to talk to the businesses, to the people who are going to do the investing and creating the jobs and all that, and see what their needs are, what they're looking for, where an economic development plan that they can respond to in a positive way, which would lead me to what will probably be heresy. I'm wondering if we shouldn't seriously consider. We have the time frame that Dorothy's put out here. I realize there's this June 1st date. I'm just wondering, we obviously all want to do it and do right, do it as thorough as we can. Whether we should be going back to you and to the county council and asking for an extension past the June 1st date. So make sure we get this thing right, and rather than rushing, because this really, at this point, it's going to be somewhat rushed, I think. Just a thought.
Is it charter?
It's a charter item.
Yeah, it's a charter. You helped write it. Should have done that. We'll just do the best we can. We'll see as we start to get closer if we have to ask for some kind of extension, but we'll see. I don't think it's a bad idea at all to get. I don't know if the county's various municipalities economic development directors, or sometimes called planning directors. I don't know how often they do get together, but I don't think it would hurt for us to convene them downtown. I don't know if the development department, Nate, did the development department used to, would the county do that in the past or not?
Through, first, we're just like mayors and managers, through the various organizations that
Right.
convene.
I don't think it would hurt
The
to,
county hasn't played a role traditionally.
the county hasn't, it's just kind of happened on its own, right? But
since January,
it wouldn't be hard for us to try to bring everybody down and at least run what we've done so far past them.
You might break it up into tasks that would be Cuyahoga County, Tri-C East, Tri-C West, and Tri-C Downtown, in an effort to try and facilitate maybe an evening activity where you're bringing the mayors and managers in their local area to get involved too. Because you've got two nice campuses that the people could be bringing in from out in the suburbs too.
Possibility.
I think the other reason to do that is try to define what local revenue streams are already being used to do various economic development functions. Look, here's what I think. My guess is we'll eventually agree on what the big picture goals are. We'll agree with most of the strategies, and then it'll be how do you come up with the resources, where do they come from? Well, resources, some of them come from nonprofits, some of them come from what the county already does, some of them will come up from what we hope the county will be able to do, and that's what we're trying to figure out. And some of it will come from what the cities are already doing, and I'm not sure we really have a great handle on what they're spending their money on, and not that we could force them to spend it the way we tell them to, but it would at least be nice to know where they're at and if there's ways to do it. The other thing is, I think we mentioned this last time, but I think we need to give a lot of consideration to this, is if there are financing mechanisms that are, because we'll have a shortage of resources to achieve the goals that we'd like to, but if there are financing mechanisms that we don't have yet that we would like to have, one of them is actually the sewer district is a financing mechanism, and there may be goals, so that's going to be coming whether people like it or not, probably. So that's one asset out there to leverage. But the other thing is there are financing mechanisms that some counties and major metropolitan areas have across the United States that we don't have here. And what makes sense, I think, in the political climate in the state right now is not to ask for more money, but to ask for flexibility on financing options. So, for instance, there have been discussions in the past about there being a sales tax TIF. Okay, we don't have that here. It is not a sales tax increase. It is leveraging the growth in sales tax, which is starting to tick up, by the way, in the county. It's gone up. I think I mentioned that last time we were here. It's gone up for the first time in a long time. It's gone up 6 months consecutively. And it has been proposed before for specific projects. But it could be done, apparently, it could be done on a countywide basis. There may be other financing options that are akin to that, and we should try to identify those, I think, as quickly as we can, because that's the only way we're going to get additional help from the state, I think.
I think you're absolutely right there. A number of the communities do not know what each other is doing, and I think that if there was a plan that we would help, the county would help on as far as some coordination, I know I've talked to some mayors who would be very happy to have some plan that they could, where theirs could be a part of it. They realize that would be making better use of the dollars.
Sure. And that's part of Larry's mandate. He knows that. I never thought the county's development department really defined that. I mean, I was amazed how little contact they really had with a lot of the cities. It was very project specific.
Very true.
And it was usually trailing a state project, to be honest with you. Okay, anything else we need to talk about for this meeting? Yes, Harry?
I just, what you said made me think, I mean, I understand that there are a number of things that the county, up to, you know, the previous county government excelled in, and this is a silly example in some ways, but like, for instance, I remember Paul Alcinas talking about those baskets along the river that were, they were like a world-class innovation. And so it's just one example. It'd be nice to sort of catalog the things that the county up to this point really has done very well in, so that we could, I mean, in some ways it might be easier to get success when something's already halfway done or has been started and formulated and thought through. And I would hate to miss any opportunities, sure. You know, because, you know, there were a number of people who did a lot of really good stuff before this. And I'd like to somehow be able to capture that and keep it going if it sounded like a...
Well, Dorothy was going to do a summary of what the county has been spending money on, so we can just hit the highlights of what we think they're, you know, what they did particularly well in the past. Anything else anybody wants to bring up? Yes, Mayor?
One more thing. I started to use the phrase, I don't want to be a dead horse, but this horse hasn't died yet, so it's not being a dead horse. But I would like to bring up something I've brought it before, I feel very strongly about, and I think a number of other people do too. It may be implicit, Dorothy, in what you said here, but I didn't see it in so many words. And that is, I would hope that as part of our plan, we would seek to, and I know you've talked about it too, seek to develop an economic development fund that would help the core city and the first ring suburbs primarily to be able to have access to funds to refurbish obsolete land, factories, office buildings, warehouses, things like that. I think that would help as far as development of jobs and getting companies to come in because of the facilities, the land is ready to go. Just, I'd like to have that thrown in, please.
I think that's in there somewhere, didn't we? Weren't we talking about it today?
Brownfield pieces.
It's in there, the brownfield. Your point's well taken.
Ohio.
Brownfields, but also be more specific as far as funds for the actual facilities, warehouses, factories. Maybe that's implicit, but I would just like to have that clarified. Thank you.
That's a good point. Anything else anybody wants to bring up for this meeting?
What would be most helpful?
Well, I may have missed it, but did this come out before the meeting? Because it would help me if I had something to look at and then I could come in prepared to comment on it. It's hard to react to something in real time.
I understand that, yeah.
And I think that to Joe's point, that part of the measurement is going to be what can we do in the first 12 months? Because that's going to be the visible sign to which whether or not we're laying the pathwork for a 5-year success. And you don't have to knock it out of the park. But you do have to have success steps that they say, here it is, and here's what we did. And again, broken record, of the 56 companies, 10 of them have now have made a decision to land something here in northeastern Ohio, whatever it happens to be. But have us focus on the 13th as to what do we think would be doable 1-year targets to be put into a 5-year long-range plan.
You know what I think would be probably the easiest way for us to really get stuff done here is let's just have a draft of it. Let's just have a draft of it. There'll be lots of holes in it, but people will see it, And I think when they see it and they visualize it, they'll say, this is too rhetorical, it's not specific enough, it's got to, because, and that's been my, I want to get down to, here's what we're going to do, and here's how we think we're going to pay for it, and here's when we think we're going to do it. So, but I think we'll be helped, and we want to get away from the philosophical as quick as we can. So let's just and let's see a couple. I think I mentioned this before, and if you gave it to me and I didn't see it, I apologize. I want to see some of those other plans. I'd like to see a draft of kind of what we have talked about or agreed, at least by silence have agreed to, and just have it put into words, even understanding that it's very, very, very rough draft, and then 4 or 5 other examples of other major metropolitan areas plans, so that we can see the level of specificity that they got to in those plans, and I think that'd be helpful.
Okay, so I will resend, or maybe I'll get you jump drives, because I think you all got a jump drive at the first meeting that had 4 plans on it. But
I must have missed
I'll
it then.
get those
I'm
to you
sorry.
again. No, that's okay. We'll get those to you again. And then I will take the stuff from here and put it in the draft that I have, and you will have that before the end of the week to look at, and just, if you can just read that and give me some feedback, I can even do some modifications so you get another iteration of it before the meeting on the 13th. Okay, I'll turn this around as quickly as I can.
Okay. Any other? We're supposed to have public comment.
Yeah.
Any questions, comments from the public? Yes, sir. If you could just, for the record, if you could just state your name and, no, right there, sir. I see you. There you go.
My name is Steve Bennett, University Heights. You mentioned, County Executive, bringing in the sewer district. The county does not act in a vacuum. The sewer district comes in with the velocity of water. Talking about the overflow, the runoff. It's the speed at which the water reaches Lake Erie. That has to do with water underground in culverts. It has to do with the park system. It has to do with the flooding. So you're planning for land in space, green space in particular, that allows you to look at some of the European cities. They are an integral part of that, whether you realize they're not, and monies are there. Likewise with the RTA, transportation. They have monies that are in that. They can put systems in. So looking at resources for money, looking at state organizations from other counties would also be a resource for this county to use as part of its planning.
That's a good point. Any other comments from the public? Somebody else had their hand up. Yes, sir, in the back.
Eric Johnson. How many people are considered for the 9th and final position on the Economic Development Commission?
About a half dozen, 6, 7. And I think you missed the first part of the meeting, but we debated the merits of the various candidates, and we took a vote. Any other questions? Yes, sir, Mr. Saffold.
County Exec.
Yes, sir.
I'm Bob Saffold. I'm president of the Ohio Minority Contractors Association. We have some 1,500 members around the state of Ohio, about 500 located in northeast Ohio. At the previous meeting I attended, I'm not sure if it's the last meeting held or not, but I mentioned to several of the people on the commission and people who attended, I was a little disappointed. I didn't see any people of color. And I was reminded that our good mayor was a part of that committee. And I'm glad to see him today. But in the names that I saw on the list, there's only one other person, I think it's Brian Hall. I don't know how Brian Hall, how long he's on this committee or not.
Yes, he is.
He is. He couldn't attend. He couldn't attend today. He's on vacation today, but he is on. He's on
I
it.
understand it's approximately 30% of the population of Cuyahoga County is people of color. And I don't think this committee is reflective of that. Maybe the overall committee is, but not the one economic development, which is probably the most important committee in county government. And I think maybe that should be expanded. I'd like to talk to someone who's going to be driving this committee about some ideas that I have in particular. We've been around a long time, and I think we have a good pulse in this community. I've lived and worked and played here over 40 years. I came to this area under the auspices of the former mayor, Carl Stokes. And we've been making a living and working a plan here since. There's probably nobody in this room, maybe even better known than I am in terms of person. This is what we do. Economic development is what we've been doing for over 40 years. We want to plan and we want to have some input. and I'd be appreciative if I was called upon.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Cool. I'm a resident of Cleveland Heights, and well, my comment primarily concerns point 7, or the last bullet point on page 7 about the $100 million economic development fund. And I served on the procurement subcommittee.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would like to suggest is that the council at an appropriate time elevate the discussion on procurement. And I think the committee, although we didn't come out with an actual specific savings, I think it's fair to say that we agreed that a substantial amount of money toward that goal could be achieved through procurement practices in the county. And those of us who have that work experience felt that that should be elevated to a higher level than I'm hearing at this point. Not from this group, I'm just saying that from the standpoint of the council, and that could provide funds for economic development. And that was something that was in the back of our minds as we went through all of these suggestions.
I think I can tell you that there hasn't been a lot of media attention or public discussion. I don't know that we've talked about it a lot in council meetings, but I can tell you that that internally at the county we are taking the suggestions of the Transition Advisory Group regarding procurement very, very seriously. We will save money. There's the biggest, the first examples of that are going to be public soon, and I am going to make a specific proposal to get us to the. I don't want to talk about it too much today because some of my finance people are still looking at it, but some of those savings are going to be built into how I think we're going to get to at least $100 million bonded fund. Keep in mind, by the way, the fact that I'm going to have to make up for approximately $30 million in state funds doesn't help me when it comes to coming up with another $100 million. So that's not helping us any, because I've got to eliminate that deficit before I can figure out how I can at least find a revenue stream where I could at least bond out $100 million, if not more. But your point is well taken, and your work has not been forgotten. And I could talk to Councilman Schron about it, but we'd be happy to have a more public discussion about it, because I want to make sure that as we implement those things, we could probably be doing a better job with that. We need to let you know as we're starting to implement some of the things that were suggested, not just your group, but some of the other ones as well. Other comments from the public? Yes, sir.
Hi, Paul Jennings. I'm from Lakewood.
Congratulations.
A couple things I noticed in that this is a strategy question. One of my big things here, kind of bringing the northeastern Ohio, I'm not native, so when I moved here, all I heard before was Burning River, Mystic on the Lake, and all of that type of thing. Come here and felt.
Why'd you come here then?
New York City.
Okay, well.
Anyway, point being is that I came here and this is now my home, and so kind of what I'm trying to do is build a way to promote it outside like that. So one thing that I noticed in the strategic plan that I think is lacking is perhaps more of the exposure for this area to the outside world. And my background is in working operations, business operations, most largely in China. So one thing I think that might be helpful is if you add in an additional piece or something that looks at the global exposure of the area. And one thing, a metric that might be possible is percentage exports or exports growth just within the Cuyahoga County or even northeastern Ohio export development, or the amount that it's increasing, decreasing. So anyway, that's my own comment. Thanks.
That's a good point.
Can
Any
I follow
comments
up
on that? Sure.
Yeah, I was thinking when the mayor said he wanted to be very practical, I thought maybe I won't say this after all, but in light of what you just said, I think it'd be good as a framing kind of thing to list the unique assets or I mean, the discussion should be within the context or the frame of our assets, you know, the lake, the port, or, you know, and things like that, the water, so I think.
Actually, the plan opens that way. The opportunity abounds because of the assets.
Okay.
And some of that's taken from the county executive's inaugural speech,
Okay.
so.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, any other comments from the public? Thank you for coming. I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Meeting's adjourned.